Okay, guys, we'll learn the daf, page 44, chapter 4. The name of the chapter is Misha Hoitzi'u. And we'll start from the top. So the Gemara ended off yesterday with a interesting case of where people are standing together. If people are creating a enclosure, if a bunch of people are coming together and they create enclosure, if you're outside of your tchum, so you're stuck now in a way. Now there was a student who wanted to walk to hear his rabbi. His name was Nehemiah, comes to Rav Nachman. He wants to come closer to hear his rabbi. So Rav Nachman gives him that option. He says that the student should stand and create an enclosure and he would be able to walk, right? So the Gemara responds to that, and the Gemara says that we are discussing a case where there are enough people to form an enclosure, stretching from Nehemiah's location back to his tchum. And Rav Chisda was in fact asking Rav Nachman whether the halacha follows the opinion of Rav Gamliel in our Mishnah, who permits someone taken out of his tchum and left in an enclosure to move about the entire enclosure. It's like the case of the boat that in the case of Rav Gamliel, he would permit you to walk throughout the whole boat. Why? Because he's saying that the whole boat becomes your 4 amas. That's your 4 amas. Right. The entire enclosure is your 4 amas.
Right.
Or Rabbi Nehemiah is asking, or maybe ein halacha kama Gamliel, and that's where the daf starts today. Is the halacha follows Rabbi Gamliel or not? That the entire enclosure is your 4 amas. Or Dilma, or perhaps Rav Chisda also follows Rabbi Gamliel's opinion, but the lo yimolu gavra askinan, where there are not enough people. Vekami bailei halacha Rabbi Lezer or halacha Rabbi Lezer. Then he asked the question whether halacha would follow Rabbi Lezer or would not follow. What was the opinion of Rabbi Lezer? The opinion of Rabbi Lezer, who permits a person who is within 2 amas of his techum to return to it. Or does the halacha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Lezer that he cannot return to it? The Gemara says, Pshita b'dolei molu gavaskin. Actually, it's obvious that the Mishnah is dealing with a case where you didn't have enough men to form an enclosure. Because if you would say, the isaka b'daitach b'demolu gavaskin, and if you say that we're dealing with a case where there is a lot of people, mighty boiler, why there's a question? Rav already said the halacha Rabban Gamliel. The halacha follows Rabban Gamliel. The deer, the sar, the sin in a case of a deer, which is a corral or fold, a corral, and a sheep. Halacha follows Rabban Gamliel that you can walk throughout the whole boat. So why Nehemiah would therefore certainly be permitted to walk? Nehemiah, the student, certainly be permitted to walk within the enclosure, the human enclosure that was created, that was formed for him. Elavadai. So really, the question is, but the loy molu gavaskin, that they didn't have enough men to form an enclosure. With Rav Lezer coming baile, and Rav Chisda is asking whether, if we follow the opinion of Rav Lezer, that it's okay to come back to your tchum. If you are within the 2 amas of his tchum, you're allowed to return to it. Taikanami. This can also be deduced from Rav Nachman's response to Rav Chisda's inquiry. The Ko'omar le'ikones, my ikones. Why does he use the word ikones? He will enter. My ikones. What does Rav Nachman mean when he added the word ikonis? He should come in, enter. Lav belei mechitza. Is it not clear that Rav Nachman was ruling that Nehemiah could re-enter even without petition? Yeah, look at number 5. Rav Nachman was giving a 2-step directive to help Nehemiah. Number 1, make a human partition to reach to within the 2 amas of his tchum. Let him get close enough to 2 amas. And number 2, let him enter the last 2 amas without benefit of a partition as ruled by Rabbi Elazar. No, if it's wall, the wall of a sukkah fell on Yom Tov. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, it happens.
He may not station a person, animal, utensils to stand in its place. No, he may not, nor may he put a bed that is in the sukkah to spread a sheet over it to serve in place of the wall. Don't use a bed instead of the wall. Why? Because you should not make a temporary tent on Yom Tov. This, by the way, the issue with the umbrellas. It's called oil arai, a temporary tent. That's why we don't do it on Shabbos. It's muktzah also, but creating a tent.
Right.
And it goes without saying that it may not be done on Shabbos. We see from that, this is on Yom Tov. We see from this that even placing something conspicuously to serve as a wall, I guess something temporary, something not strong enough, such as a bed, is forbidden on Shabbos and Yom Tov. How then could Rav Nachman instruct Rav Chisda to make a human enclosure on Shabbos? If you're not allowed to make a temporary, you understand the Shaila from Sukkah. This is a question of Nachman. Rav Chisda comes to Rav Nachman and he says, your student is in tzar, is in pain. He wants to hear your lecture, but he's stuck outside of the tchum. So what is Rav Nachman's answer? Make a structure for him, make an enclosure for him, human enclosure. So why? So the Gemara says, how is it possible in the case of a sukkah, if the wall came down, you're not allowed to put the bed.
Right.
Why can't you put a bed?
Right. So you could say the same about having a bunch of people for the guy.
That's the shaila. Yeah. You tell me that making a human enclosure on Shabbos is prohibited based on this baisa. Now we'll tell you that it's permitted based on the following baisa. So now he brings the support from a different baisa. What is the support? And a person may use his friend as a wall of a sukkah.
So he's going to stand there like an idiot.
So that he may eat and drink and sleep in it. And he may also put a bed at the edge of the sukkah and spread a sheet over it, so that the sunlight should not fall on a corpse, causing it to decay, or on food, causing it to spoil. Similarly, this baisa would permit forming a human enclosure on the Shabbos.
Oh, wait a minute.
It's opposite baisa, completely opposite, 2 different baisas. So, come Rav Nachum Bar Yitzchak, and he challenges Rava from this baisa.
Yeah.
That you're not supposed to do it. Come Rav Nachman and brings a baita that says exactly the opposite. So the Gemara says, Kasha Na'adota, the 2 baisas contradict each other. Right?
Yeah.
So the Gemara says, Lo Kasha, it's not difficulty. Why? Rabbi Elazar. The first baisa which prohibits putting is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbanon, the second baisa, is the opinion of the rabbis. That now, for we learned in the Mishnah, Pekar Kachaloi, a window shutter. A window shutter.
Yeah.
Rabbi Elazar, still houses with window shutters, right? Bisman shekoshu v'solui, when it is fastened to the building by a rope, and the rope is so short that the shutter is suspended. Poi kikin boy, we may shutter the window with. We may shutter the window with it on the Shabbos. Vim lav. However, if the shutter is not suspended in this manner, it's not kosher v'tolui. It's not fastened to the building by a rope. Ain't breaking, but we may not shutter the window with it. It is prohibited rabbinically because it is similar to the biblically prohibited form of building, even though the shutter is placed there only temporarily.
So if you say, there's a hurricane coming, and you want to put the shutters on it, and it's like loose, you can't do this on Shabbos. But if it was
right, that's what he says. If kosher v'tolu, yes, you may use it. But if lav, if not, you don't use it. The rabbis disagree, and they say benkach uvenkach breaking, regardless whether it's fastened or and what was the other? He said kosher v'tolu, fastened and suspended. Even if it's not fastened and suspended, you're allowed to use it. That's the opinion of the rabbis. So, accordingly, we may say that Rabbi Lezer, who prohibits shuttering the window, even though it is only a temporary addition to the structure, would also prohibit erecting a temporary wall in a sukkah. You understand the connection?
Yeah.
Because if he's not letting us use the shutter, the window shutter, which is a temporary.
But it's an add-on to the window. It's not
Right.
really.
Right, so he wouldn't let you also in case of a sukkah. Right, Maralo, and the rabbis who allow you, they would be according to the brisa that permits it. Right, Maralo, but it was said about this dispute between Rabbi Lezer and the sages. I'm a Rabbi Yochanan Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Akol Moedim She'eno Simo L'Arai B'Tchil B'Yom Tov. All agree that we may not erect a temporary structure from the start on Yom Tov. V'en tzarich lemar b'Shabbos, and it goes without saying that this is forbidden on Shabbos. So here's the answer. Akol moedim, everybody agrees that you don't make a temporary tent on Shabbos, but on Yom Tov, and obviously on Shabbos, you shouldn't do it. So what is the machlokes? Ela lo yosef. The machlokes is lo yosef, which means they disagree only when one is permitted to make a temporary addition to existing structure.
Okay, that's what I said.
And Moisif b'Yom Tov and Tzarich lemar b'Shabbos. Rabbi Lezer says we don't do it on Yom Tov, and I don't even need to tell you that you can't do it on Shabbos. Ve'ein tzarich lemar b'Yom Tov. Now, Chacham say exactly the opposite. You're allowed to add on Shabbos, and I don't need to tell you that you're allowed to do it on Yom Tov. Goes without saying that on Yom Tov will be okay.
No, I got all the shutters in the yard, not knowing to put them up or not.
Ela leikash. Rather, so the Gemara offers another resolution to the discrepancy between the brises. How could it be like two brises that are exactly opposites of one another? Ela leikash akrav mir akrav Buddha. Bringing opinion of Meir and Buddha, the Tanya, Asol levemedof and lesuka Meir Pesel, if he used an animal to be a doifen, to be a wall for the sukkah. Rabbi Meir says no good. Rabbi Meir Pesel, invalid. Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yehuda said it's okay. Rabbi Meir, the Kaposil, also, Rabbi Meir rules it invalid there in the case of a sukkah wall made of an animal. Why does he says it's invalid? Because he doesn't think it's a proper mechitza. It's not a proper partition. It's not a proper wall. It's mobile. It moves. Achashori, but here in the case of a sukkah wall that fell down Yom Tov, he would permit placing an animal in the space. The lav midei ka'ovid, because he would not legally accomplish anything by doing so, since the sukkah would remain invalid. Oh, so he says you can do it because it doesn't help him in any way.
Yeah.
But why would he do it to begin with? Let's say 19. He says, although the animal serves as a temporary wall, in fact, even if it does not render a sukkah valid, so it's a temporary wall, but it's not making the sukkah valid, which is also seemingly a contradiction. If it's a temporary wall, why the sukkah is not valid? But the Gemara now assumes that Rabbi Meir permits putting up a temporary partition, even if it is completely new and not just an addition to another structure. It is therefore permitted to make a use of the animal to provide privacy for the inside of the sukkah. But this is only because the sukkah remains invalid. Or it become valid as a result of the animal placed there, it would not be permitted merely because it is temporary. So Rashi really answered us, why would somebody do it? Because to provide privacy, but it's not making the sukkah valid.
Right.
So, like he said, if God forbid there was a corpse in the sukkah, so you need something to bring shade, so the sun doesn't cause the body to decay,
Right.
or you don't want food to be destroyed, so you put. So the animal only serving, it's a temporary wall, but it's not making the sukkah valid. But
Right.
if it would make the sukkah valid, Rabbi Meir would prohibit you using this animal. In this case, it would be okay because the lav midei ka'ovid. However, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a rule that a sukkah wall made of an animal is valid. We see that an animal is a valid partition. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's considered a valid partition. Hosom, he is machshir in the case of when, according to Rabbi Yehuda, rules that a sukkah wall made of an animal is valid, for which we see that an animal is a valid partition. Also, here, in the case of the wall that fell down, he would prohibit completing the sukkah by stationing an animal to stand in place of the wall, because this would legally accomplish something. So it boils to whether it's legally accomplishing something or not. If it's not legally accomplishing something, then you're allowed to do it. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says that it does legally accomplish something, and therefore you shouldn't be doing it. You can say that you have heard Rabbi Meir invalidate the sukkah wall behemo in regard to an animal because it might run away. Or have you heard him declare invalid a wall formed by a person or utensils? A person can be told to remain standing as long as is necessary, and utensils are immobile. By your logic, therefore, Rabbi Meir should prohibit using these for sukkah walls on Yom Tov, but the Vaisa cited by Rava permits the use of humans and utensils as a sukkah wall. The two, furthermore, Rabbi Meir aliba deman, according to whom does Rabbi Meir permits putting up a new temporary wall? If, according to Rabbi Lezer, who prohibits shuttering a window, Loisif Nami also, Rabbi Lezer prohibits even adding something temporary to an existing building. Certainly, he would prohibit making a completely new sukkah wall with an animal. Ela liba de rabbanon. Rather, Rabbi Meir must be ruling according to the rabbis, who disagree with Rabbi Lezer and permit shuttering the window, but this also cannot be true. You can only say that the rabbis say that the temporary structures may be erected on the Shabbos. Lois, if in regard to making an addition to an existing structure, such as in the case of the window shutter. But they say it But did they say it is permitted to start a new structure, even a temporary one, such as a new sukkah wall? It is therefore impossible to link the discrepancy between the two biases to the dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. So, Aliba de Rabbanon, Rabbi Meir must be ruling according to the rabbis, disagree with Rabbi Lezer, and permit shuttering the window. Remember, Emar Da'amr Rabbanon said the rabbis say that the temporary structure may be erected only on Shabbat Le'oisif in regard to making an addition to an existing structure. Lechatchila mi'amru, but they didn't say that it's permitted to start a new structure, even a temporary one, such as a new sukkah wall. So it is therefore impossible to link the discrepancy between the two biases, the dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Ela ho veho Rabbon. Rather, both biases follow the opinion of the rabbis, who permit making a temporary addition to existing structure, but forbid constructing even a temporary partition from the start. But the first bias's ruling regarding utensils as partition does not contradict the second bias's ruling regarding utensils. This bias, which prohibits putting up utensils such as bed for a sukkah wall, refers to a third wall. Why? Because the third wall will make the sukkah valid. However, the bias who permits placing utensils to serve as a sukkah wall refers to the optional fourth wall of the sukkah, so it doesn't add anything to the validity of the sukkah.
It's only the third wall that does
Yeah.
the job.
Daikanami, this can be also deduced from a careful reading of that first bias. The Kisoni Nofal Doifno, for it teaches if its wall fell, this implies that it is referring to the critical third wall of the sukkah. Shmamina learn from this that the Baisa prohibits temporary construction only in this case, where the wall renders something valid, as the Gemara has just explained. Why would the Gemara mention Nofal Dofno, that the wall fell down, if it's not compromising the kashrus of the sukkah? If it's the fourth wall, there's
Nobody cares.
Exactly. So if you say Nofal Dofno, means its third wall has come
Right.
down. So what do we learn from it? The first baita prohibits temporary construction only in this case, where the wall renders something valid. Going to page 88, 44b1. The Hebrew is 88. See it? By you?
Mem Dalet.
By me, it's
They messed up.
no. That's the original set of the Gemara is really 88 because it counts. Think about it. You page 44, so it counts the amudim. Each column,
Right.
column is one. So you're really in the 88th column. Ela odom kashya odom nami loy kashya. The Gemara says but the first bias is ruling about humans contradicts the second bias's ruling about humans. First baita prohibits using a person to replace his sukkah wall, while the second baita permits this. Since the second baita states that placing the person there permits eating and sleeping in the sukkah, it is clearly dealing with the critical third wall.
Right.
Odom namili kashyo. The contradiction from human to human also presents no difficulty. Why? Kan ledas, here in the first baisa, the person is aware that is being used as a partition for the sukkah, and it is therefore forbidden to use them. Kan Shaloi Midas, the second Brisa, the person is not aware that he's being used as a partition, and it is therefore permissible to use him. So we have a little summary of the above. It says the first Brisa, you see the bracket?
Yeah.
One may not place a person, animal, utensil on Yom Tov to serve as a sukkah partition. Then the same Brisa tells us one may not put a bed on Yom Tov and spread a sheet over it to serve as a sukkah partition. Don't use humans and don't use bed. Okay? Second Brisa says one may use a person as a partition on Yom Tov to render a sukkah valid for eating and sleeping, and one may put up a bed. Everything he said no before, now they're saying yes. But for what? They say to protect a corpse or food from the sun. That's what the Gemara. Ela odom odom kasha odom. The Gemara says no. Odom odom loy kasha kan midas kan shelo midas. One is he's aware and one is not aware. What's the difference? Said, look at number 2. It says a person standing there with the intention of serving as a wall may be considered reminiscent of a wall. He is like a wall, and placing him there is similar to the biblically prohibited form of boine. That person is boine. He is constructing the sukkah because he is now making it kosher. So that's the problem when he's aware of what he's doing. Says number 3, even though this Brisa agrees that it is prohibited to erect a new temporary structure on Yom Tov, one may use a person who is unaware of his function for this purpose, since his reason for standing there is for some other reason. He does not stand in a manner reminiscent of a wall, and thus arranging for him to stand there does not resemble putting up a partition. The Gemara says, having resolved the discrepancies between the two Brisas, the Gemara now applies these rules to Rav Nachman's ruling to form a human enclosure to enable Rabbi Nehemiah to return to his Techum area. Remember, going back to the original question, can we let Nehemiah come and hear the lecture of his Rebbe by forming a human enclosure? But in this incident involving Rabbi Nehemiah, the son of Rabbi Chanilai, the people being used for the enclosure were presumably aware that they were being used as a partition to form an enclosure to aid him, to aid Nehemiah. How did Rav Nachman permit this? What did we say before? The human is okay in the case of a sukkah only when he's not aware. But the Talmidim of Nachman for sure are aware of what they're doing.
Yeah.
There was a Shalom Midas Havo. The people were not aware that they were being used as a partition. Rav Chisda asked them to assemble in that location without explaining to them the reason for his request. So they weren't aware. Rav Chisda, so the Gemara said, 1 second, Rav Chisda did know why he is telling them to assemble. Rav Chisda was aware that human partitions were being made. How could he be part of this enclosure? So Chisda says, Shalei min aminyan haba, he wasn't part of the enclosure. So let's read the summary, number 5. In summary, according to the rabbis who permit making a temporary addition to a structure on Yom Tov and the Shabbos, if a sukkah has 3 proper walls, so that it is a valid sukkah, one may put up a temporary 4th partition to protect against the sun, for example. Now, however, if the sukkah is missing its 3rd wall, it is forbidden to put up a utensil to serve as a temporary 3rd wall, because now he's making it valid. Similarly, one may not ask a person to stand and serve as the 3rd wall if the person is aware that this is his function. One may, however, ask him to stand there if he is not aware of his function, since he is not at all like building. Even though all agree that it is forbidden to create a new, even temporary structure, one may make a new structure out of people who are unaware of the function they are serving. Such a person may be used to complete the sukkah's third wall, and the whole group may be used to create partition, as in the case of Rabbi Nehemiah. Okay, the Gemara cites an incident involving use of human partitions. Hanu beiganono, there were these members of a wedding party. What does it mean they were members of a wedding party? Rabbi Hananel and the other Rashi, people formed a ring reaching from Rishus Rabim back into Rishus Yachid. Okay, let's see. Anu b'nei ganon, da'ilu mai b'mechitzos b'nei adam, who carried water from a Rishus Rabim into a Rishus Yachid with the use of human partition. So imagine a guy goes to a public domain, and they walked into our Rishus Rabim, assuming the public domain had a well, a body of water, and there was a bucket there. The guy goes, and assuming the water was not the Rishus Yochid, okay? Because sometimes the body of water becomes a Rishus Yochid, if it's 10x4, whatever, let's say it wasn't Rishus Yochid. So not necessarily body of water, there was water in Rishus Rabim. They take the bucket from Rishus Rabim. How can you carry it? If you have people that are forming an enclosure around you. So they're walking, and you walk in the middle. So let's say enclosure of three walls and a lechi, 3 walls and a little bit of making a doif. Anyhow, so he's walking in the middle, one guy's walking, and the whole entourage of people walking with him, creating an enclosure. So that was the story. These members of wedding party, I guess, needed water, who carried water from Rishus Rabim into Rishus Yochid with the use of human partition. Even though the people knew they were being used for the purpose, I guess it is something they could not ignore. Why they're doing it? It was obvious. Shmuel flogged them for violating the Shabbos. Omar, if the sages said that human partitions may be made on the Shabbos, the people are not aware of their function. Did they say this is permitted when people are aware? How can they do it? He said, Shmuel was upset at them. Shmuel said, you're violating Shabbos. Sages said, Shalom mitas, only when people are not aware that you allowed to do it. But in this case, you are aware. Hanuzike, another incident. Hanuzike de'ave shadin berista kodem echeza. His leather flasks belonging to Rava that had been left in the square of the town of Mecheza on Shabbos. And in note 8, it tells us that we're dealing with the Rishus Rabim. This was the Rishus Rabim. So when Rava returning from delivering his lecture, he was surrounded by a crowd of people who had been at the lecture. So when they reached the location of the flask, Rava's attendant carried them with him into the Rishus Yochid. Shabbos Achir, another Shabbos, when the flask had again been left in the square, Ba'alinu, Rava attendant wanted to do the same shtick again, the same trick, using human partition. But also, Rava says no. Also, because it was like a case of their being aware that they were being used as partitions, and this is prohibited. It's like doing it twice is already that it's going to be obvious that you're doing it for the sake of for using the people as partitions. Another incident, other occasions, human partitions were used. Levi had straw brought in to him from Rishus Rabim using human partitions. Zeira aspasto, zeiri had fodder brought to him, animal food. By this method, human enclosure, Rav Shimon bar Chio Mayo, Rav Shimon bar Chio had water brought to him. So here are incidents where this method of caring was done. Let's go to page 44b2. We're starting a new Mishnah. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah teaches that a person may leave his techum on the Shabbos to journey to Yerushalayim and testify before the Sanhedrin concerning the sighting of the new moon. Once the person has testified, he should strictly speaking, be confined to 4 amas in which he is standing, since he is outside his personal tchum. So they allowed him to come because they needed someone to testify that he saw the new moon, the birth of the moon. But they, once he made it there, he was not allowed to move around anymore. Once he gave his testimony. However, Rabbi Gamliel, so this indeed was the original practice. Kam Rabbi Gamliel enacted the law awarding a person coming for this purpose. If you came for this purpose, Rabbi Gamliel awarded you a new tchum. He said you are allowed to walk 2,000 amos. This leniency was extended to include people who leave the tchum for the purposes of saving life. So if you're saving life, a midwife who goes to deliver a baby, or people going to rescue others from a fire or an attacking army. The following Mishnah deals with a person who left on such an urn, but before he reached his destination, discovered that his services were no longer. Oh, so that's an interesting case. So if somebody goes to tell the Beis Din about testifying that he saw the new moon, and on his way he finds out that it's not needed anymore because someone already testified. Someone who left his techum with legal permission, he did it properly. And the deed, and then they told him while he was on the way, they told him the deed was already being done, so that there is no need to proceed further. So the Mishnah tells us, so he has now a new tchum of 2,000 amos in every direction. If he was still within the original tchum, as if he never left, if he was still within the tchum. Now all those living the tchum to rescue people may return to their places. So what does it mean if he was within the tchum as if he never left? What does that mean, the statement? If he was inside his tchum, as if he never left his house, and his 2,000 amos are still measured from it and from the place where he finds himself. Most pshita, this is obvious. After all, since he has not left his tchum, why should his 2,000 amos not center around his house? So you might have said that once he has uprooted himself from his tchum by setting out to live it permissibly, he left it in a permissible way. He has uprooted himself, and his tchum now centers around his person, or where he's at now, not his house, even though he has not yet left his original tchum. Kamashma, the Mishnah therefore informs us that this is not so. In the tchum, it's like you didn't leave your house. As long as he's within the area of its original tchum, he remains confined to the boundaries of that tchum, and if he had never left his house. The one presents another explanation of the Mishnah statement, that if he was within the tchum, it is as if he never left. Rav Shimon bar Chia Omar, Achik Omar, this is what it means. The phrase in question is an elaboration of the first ruling of the Mishnah, which refers to a person who has in fact gone out of his tchum and has received a new tchum. If the new tchum area that the sages awarded him partially overlapped his original tchum, it is as if he never left his original tchum. He returns to his original tchum and resumes the full use of it. Ma'ikam Ifligain, what issue do they, Rabbi and Rav Shimi, disagree? So this is also a little bit of a different scenario. The case, it says, if the new tchum area that the sages awarded him partially overlapped his original tchum, is still within his original tchum. It's as if he never left his original tchum. He returns to his original tchum and resumes the full use of it. It says in 18, since the new tchum to which he is now entitled enables him to reach his old tchum, he returns there and resumes that tchum. Must he return to his original tchum? Elia Rabbo, in note 18, Elia Rabbo understand this to mean that he is required to return to his original tchum. Ben Yaakov disagree and said that as long as he stays within the new tchum, he is not required to return to his original tchum. Mishnah Berurah quotes both opinions but favors the latter view as the halacha. However, all agree that if he re-enters his original tchum, he is obliged to resume it and automatically loses the new tchum. It can dance on both parties.
Yeah.
So, in what issue Rabbi and Rav Shimi disagree? Mar Sova, Rav Shimi holds Avlas Techum Milsu. The overlap of Techum areas is legally recognized principle, joining the two Techum areas into a single Techum. It says in 19, since the new Techum he now receives overlaps his original Techum, it merges both Techumin and allows him to leave the new Techum beyond the overlap to return to the old. However, once he enters into the area of his original Techum, he automatically forfeits the new Techum, which was only granted temporarily while he was out of his original Techum. So this allows him to return. Okay, Umar Sovar Lav Milsei. The overlap of Techum area is not a legally recognized principle. So Milsoi means legally recognized. Lav Milsei, it's not legally recognized. Once he's outside the original Techum, he may not return to it, even if the new Techum partially overlaps the old. Abai raises an objection to Rabbi's opinion. Abai says to Rabbi, do you not hold that the overlap of Techum areas is legally recognized principle? What would be if one began the Shabbos in a cave? Began the Shabbos in a cave, whose interior was 4,000 amas long, like those tunnels, right?
Caverns.
It gives the diagram, shows you a cave that is 4,000 amas, a bunker. But whose roof, the ground above the cave, was slightly less than 4,000 amas because the walls of the cave slope downward. This cave had two entrances, one at each end. Lo nimtza is not a fact that mehalech eskula v'chutza l'alpayim. He may walk above ground the entire length of the cave, the nearly 4,000 amas from one entrance to the other, and 2,000 amas beyond it. Kula v'chutza l'alpayim amo. That this not necessarily involve combining two techum areas into one large techum area because they overlap. So the reason the Gemara brings this case of a cave, because maybe it's a similar case of overlapping tchumin. The one overlaps the other. So you, Rabbah, must also agree that the principle of the overlap techum area is recognized. So Rabbah responds to Abaye that the case of the cave is not relevant to the case of the Mishnah. Because Abaye is saying that Avlas Tchumim, the case of overlap Tchum, is something that is legally recognized principle. He's surprised that Rabbah doesn't treat it as it's legally recognized. That's why he brings the case of the cave. Do you not distinguish between the case where he began the Shabbos within the walls of the cave, started the Shabbos within the walls of the cave, while it was yet day, before Shabbos began, and thus acquired two techum areas, one at each entrance. And the case where he did not begin the Shabbos within the walls of the new tchum while it was yet day, and thus acquired only a single tchum, which was then supplanted by another tchum. In the case, so let's look at 23. Obviously, a tricky case. In the case where the cave was his Shabbos residence, that's where he started off his Shabbos. When the Shabbos began, he simultaneously acquired both tchum areas, 2,000 amas from each entrance of his residence. You can see by the arrows, he has 2,000 to this side and 2,000 to the other side from each entrance. Right. So really, the guy is having 4,000 in the bottom, right. 8,000 amas in total. That's why he can maneuver. Okay. Since the two areas are the consequence of one residence, they can be considered one large techum by virtue of the overlap. In the Mishnah's case, however, the two techum areas were acquired as a result of two separate or separate residences. He began the Shabbos in his original tchum. That was the case. Now left to run his errands, and was awarded a new tchum because he was going for saving, rescuing something, or doing the mitzvah of testifying the birth of the new moon. Therefore, the new tchum has no relation to the original tchum. And if he now has a new tchum, the original tchum no longer exists. The fact that the area of his new tchum partially overlaps the area what used to be his tchum does not require for him the use of that original tchum. Again, the fact that the area of his new tchum partially overlaps the area of what used to be his tchum, the old one, does not require for him the use of the original tchum area. So it doesn't help him, according to Rabbah. Avlos tchumim lav milsei. It's not legally recognized principle, according to Rabbah. So in other words, he's saying, don't bring me the case of a cave because it's different. The case of a cave he has access from two sides, has two openings, and therefore he gains the 2,000 amas from each direction. In regular Techum, he doesn't have that luxury. So the Abaye questions this distinction and shows that the principle of the overlap of Techum areas applies even when the second Techum area was acquired after the Shabbos began. The principle of the overlap Techum areas applies. That's the Abaye. That's what he tells Rabbi in response, that the principle of the overlap of Techum areas applies even when the second Techum area was acquired after the Shabbos began. And where he did not begin the Shabbos, in a place that provides him with two Techum areas, is there no combining of Techum areas when they overlap? Atanan, we learned in the Mishnah, page 45 and 1, we learned in the Mishnah that if one left his Techum area without legal permission, Abulel says if he went only 2 ames beyond his Techum, he may enter the Techum. But if he already left 3 ames, he may not re-enter. Bruchim Tiu, and we shall continue, God willing, tomorrow.